So, welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to our lecture series called Daily News in Shorts. In this lecture series, we cover that day's newspaper in a very short span of time within 20 minutes. Now, in today's lecture, we are going to be covering the current affairs from August 19, 2024's newspaper. And the important news items that featured in today's newspaper or in August 19 newspaper are as following. Okay. So these are the four topics. You should concentrate on these four topics. Though many news items featured in August 19th newspaper, there were various news articles. But for us civil services aspirants, these four news items were of extreme importance. So we will try to confine our attention to these four topics alone. Okay. The first topic is related to lateral entry into bureaucracy. Recently, UPSC has released a notification inviting applications for the post of Joint Secretary, Director, Deputy Director in various ministries of central government. Okay. Now, this is a lateral entry notification. So, we'll talk about the issue of lateral entry and why opposition parties are opposing this. We'll talk about the entire issue. Then, India's oil import dependency is on the rise. In fact, it is said that 88% of India's oil requirements, crude oil requirements, are met through imports. Now, this has risen quite a lot, and there are few reasons behind this rise. So, we'll get into this issue. Then, recently, Odisha government has decided to grow palm trees on a mass scale to prevent lightning-related deaths. So, how can palm trees protect against lightning-related deaths? We'll talk about this issue. And recently, an article was published which talked about the contributions made by Indians in USA. So Indians have made a lot of contributions. Indians contribute to a lot of tax revenue, to a lot of jobs in USA. So we'll talk about this because this is also an important thing for us. Okay, so without much delay, let's start with topic number one, which is lateral entry into bureaucracy. Now look, important posts in central government as well as state government. The top level posts in central government and state government are handled by all the important posts are handled by bureaucrats, which are IAS, IPS officers. Right? For police, there are IPS officers. For administration and management, there are IS officers. Now, these IS officers are selected at a very young age through an exam that is, we all are preparing for that exam, right? So, UPSC conducts an exam, and then career bureaucrats are selected, and they, after promotion, they rise to these levels. But government has decided that for high level posts, people from private sector should also be invited. They will be invited for a limited period of time, for 3 years or 5 years. But outside experience is also important in government. So certain posts that were occupied by IS officers should now be open for lateral entrants, those who come from different careers, okay, in private sector or other areas, right? Now, UPSC started advertising for these lateral entries into bureaucracy way back in 2018, and recently in 2024, a new application or a new advertisement was published by UPSC. So, UPSC on Saturday issued an advertisement seeking application for lateral recruitment to the post of Joint Secretary, Director, and Deputy Secretary. All these posts are occupied by IS officers. Okay. Now, these posts are in total 45 posts in 24 ministries of union government. For that, UPSC has invited applications for outsiders. Now, appropriate qualifications experience from state governments, PSU, statutory organization, research institutes, universities, private sectors are eligible to apply. Now, the thing is that opposition parties have been criticizing this policy because through lateral entries, there is no scope for reservations. Okay, if there is an exam conducted by UPSC, there are reservations, but for lateral entrants, there is no reservation. And this is why opposition parties are saying that government wants to bypass reservation, and that is why they are inviting lateral entrants. Because there is no reason to reserve posts in lateral entries, and that is why government is deliberately inviting lateral entries. Okay, this is what opposition parties allege, that government is using lateral entry scheme to bypass reservation. Okay, now about lateral entry scheme, we need to know about this. So this was proposed in 2017 by Niti Aayog. Niti Aayog actually created a 3-year action agenda. Plus, there was another committee called Sectoral Group of Secretaries. They also, in their report, recommended the induction of lateral entrants in middle and senior management levels in central government. Okay. Now, these lateral entrants would occupy the posts of joint secretaries, directors, deputy directors. Okay. Now, they would be given temporary contracts of 3 years, which can be extended up to 5 years. Okay. That's all you need to know about lateral entries. All right. But yes, as far as the scheme is concerned, we need to know about its advantages and disadvantages. Okay. So, here are the list of advantages and disadvantages. So, benefits. Lateral recruitment is aimed at achieving the twin objectives of bringing in fresh talent as well as augment the availability of manpower. So, if there is a shortage of manpower, well, lateral entrants would fill that role, and we will be able to bring outside expertise. Also, allow government to tap into individual domain expertise and specialized know-how, regardless of whether they are career bureaucrats or not. So let's suppose government thinks that in under the Department of Science and Technology, we need to hire a scientist from ISRO. But that won't be possible if lateral entries are not allowed. But now lateral entries are allowed. Government can hire a scientist for to head or to handle certain tasks of Department of Science and Technology. Okay, so these are the benefits. Criticism, as we have discussed before, no scope for reservation. Okay, all right. Topic number 2, rising oil import dependency. Now, hear me out. India's reliance on imported crude oil to meet its domestic consumption needs climbed to over 88%, which means 88% of India's crude oil requirements are being met through imports. Okay, and the reason for that is simple. First of all, demand for crude oil has increased in India, and that is why government of India has to import more. Plus, domestic supply. India also produces some amount of crude oil. Okay, but domestic supply of crude oil has stagnated. So India is not being able to produce enough crude oil. Plus, demand of crude oil is on the rise, and that is why this gap is being filled through imports. Okay. Now, this data was released by Oil Ministry's Petroleum Planning and Analysis Center. Now, what is the problem with heavy import dependence? First of all, if India imports a lot of oil, well, then India becomes vulnerable to global oil prices. Okay, if global oil prices rise, well, it's bad news for India. If they fall, it's good news for India. So India's dependency on global oil prices increases. Plus, India's import bill increases. This leads to higher trade deficit. Higher trade deficit leads to depletion of foreign exchange reserves. Depletion of foreign exchange reserves leads to decline in rupee vis-a-vis dollar. And if petrol becomes expensive, global oil prices increase. Well, it leads to overall inflation in India. So that is why government has been taking steps to reduce oil import dependency. Now, first step is government is pushing for electric cars, biofuels, other alternative fuels, so that there is less requirement or less demand for petrol and diesel in India. Plus, side by side, government is also making or giving incentives for domestic companies to explore and mine for petroleum in India itself. Okay, so government is providing various incentives for oil and gas exploration in India. This would increase India's own domestic supply for oil and gas. All right, so we would be less dependent on imports. So these are the two steps taken by government. Now, about crude oil imports in India. So the level of import dependency. Okay, this percentage that we are talking about, 88%, it's calculated on a very in a different way. You see, India imports crude oil, but these imports are utilized for two purposes. One, to domestic needs. India needs crude oil. The other is that India imports crude oil, refines it into petrol, diesel, and then exports it. So some crude oil imports are for domestic needs, some crude oil exports are for export purposes. Now this 88%, when we say that our crude oil dependency, import dependency on crude oil is 88%, it is 88% of domestic needs. We exclude export. Okay, so imports used for domestic needs only. That means 88% of India's domestic needs are satisfied through imports. Okay. India is world's third largest consumer of crude oil and also one of its top importers. But India is a net exporter of fuels because India refines crude oil and exports it. Export of crude oil from India is banned. India can only export refined crude oil, but raw crude oil cannot be exported from India. Okay, all right. Now let's move forward. We'll talk about lightning strikes and palm trees. So basically, let's see what is in the news. Odisha has begun the plantation of 20 lakh palm trees to protect its population against injury or death due to lightning strikes, which were designated as a state-specific disaster in 2015. In fact, a total of 3,790 people have lost their lives to lightning since last 11 years. The government has provided 4 lakh ex gratia grant to the family members of the deceased. Okay. Now, what is Odisha's vulnerability? Why is Odisha so vulnerable to lightning strikes? The highest number of cloud to lightning strikes occur in eastern and central India. Now, annual lightning report 2023-24 was released in India, and it said that eastern and central India are the most vulnerable to lightning strikes. Plus, Odisha is an eastern coastal state and is in the tropical region. So, therefore, hot, dry climate presents the perfect recipe for lightning strikes. All right. Plus, global warming. Global warming is also contributing. How? Experts say that a 10% increase in lightning activity results from every 1 degree Celsius of long term warming. So, with every 1 degree Celsius rise in atmospheric temperatures, 10% increase in lightning can be seen. So that is why global warming is also contributing to higher lightning strikes. Okay. Now, how can palm trees help? What is so special about palm trees? So, look, palm trees are uniquely suited to be lightning conductors because of their height among trees. So, they grow very high. So, whenever lightning strikes the ground, it is absorbed by the tops of palm trees. So, it doesn't reach humans on the ground. It is absorbed by palm trees at their top level. Okay. Plus, they contain high moisture and sap, which can absorb lightning and reduce its impact on the ground. But some critics say that this step by Odisha government will not solve all problems. Why? Because generally a palm tree needs 15 to 20 years to attain the height of 20 feet. So people have to wait another 15 to 20 years. Plus, it is also said that some trees might catch fire due to lightning and lead to forest fires. So this is also a concern. But nonetheless, palm trees are best suited to control lightning related mortality. Okay? And last, Indian diaspora in USA. Now, why was this in news? Because there is an NGO, US based NGO called Diaspora, which actually details the contribution of Indian Americans to US and their impact on the country. Now, their report was called Small Community, Big Contribution, Boundless Horizons, the Indian Diaspora in United States. And it actually took data from Migration Policy Institute. So basically, Diaspora took data from Migration Policy Institute, checked the amount of contributions made by Indians in USA, and then published this report. Okay. Now, what are the contributions made by Indians? Well, you can see from here. Okay. 60% of all US hotels are owned by Indian Americans, 72 unicorn startups in USA are Indian immigrants, and so on and so forth. You can read about all of this. Okay. All the points mentioned in this report from our notes. Notes are available, notes of this lecture are available in PDF format on our Telegram channel. The link to our Telegram channel is provided in the comment section below. So make sure you check that out, download the PDF, and download the entire notes for this lecture. All right. And with that, we conclude today's session. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. And I hope it added value to your preparation, though it would add more value if you're consistent with this lecture series. So on that note, I'll be signing off. Thank you, everyone.